Coming up on The World Today. A new frontier opens up in the fighting between Israeli military and Gaza militants as rockets are fired from Lebanon. We'll be checking in on that Africa summit holding in the French capital as we hear leaders agree on reallocation of $100 billion in IMF reserves. Plus, Germany agrees to pay Namibia reparations from colonial-era genocide. Thanks for joining us, everyone. I'm Joke Rogers in Lagos. Israel has retaliated 4 rockets fired into north of the country from Lebanon with attacks on a number of targets in Lebanese territory. One of the rockets from Lebanon was intercepted and another landed in an open field. 2 more landed in the Mediterranean Sea. Warning sirens were activated in the area of Khalifa and surroundings, including Shafram, Acre, and the Krayot region. This comes as Israel and Gaza continue to exchange airstrikes. Meanwhile, the U.S. President Joe Biden, who spoke with the Israeli Prime Minister over the telephone, indicated he expects a significant de-escalation today on the path to a ceasefire.
It has been another day of airstrikes and artillery between the Israeli military and militants in Gaza, without any sign of a ceasefire, despite international calls to end more than a week of fighting. Israeli leaders say they are pressing on with an offensive against Hamas and Islamic Jihad. The military says an estimated 12,000 missiles and mortars in the group's arsenal rockets will continue to pound Israel. According to the Israeli army, 50 rockets were fired overnight from Gaza, with sirens sounding in the coastal city of Ashdod, south of Tel Aviv, and in communities closer to the Gaza border. There were no reports of damage or injuries. In a 25-minute attack overnight, 52 Israeli aircraft struck Hamas tunnels in the southern Gaza Strip. 40 targets were hit in the operation. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas accuses Israel of committing war crimes. During a video conference call addressing an emergency meeting by the Arab Parliament in Cairo, he said, "What the occupation is doing in Gaza, including vicious attacks on civilians, deliberate shelling of residential areas and institutions, destruction of infrastructure, as well as the killing of women, elderly and children, is organized state terrorism carried out by the Israeli occupation."
When you do ask your questions, that you identify yourself.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu today made no mention of any halt to the fighting in public remarks at a briefing to foreign ambassadors to Israel, saying he was engaged in forceful deterrence to prevent future conflict with Hamas.
We try to target those who target us with great precision. That is not as surgical an operation as it is. Even in a surgical room in a hospital, you don't have the ability to prevent collateral damage around affected tissues. Even then you can't. And certainly in a military operation you cannot. But there is no army in the world that does more than the Israeli army, in the Israeli security services, in Israeli intelligence, to prevent collateral damage.
And as the conflict continues, the Palestinians continue to bury their dead.
The VOA's Ricky Rosen is in Jerusalem. Ricky, thanks for joining us on the program today. So let's talk about the new frontier to the conflict opening up in Lebanon. How does this change the dynamic of the conflict as well as the possibility of a ceasefire?
I'm not sure that it will have any effect on the conflict with Gaza. The Israeli military is trying to play down the seriousness of the rocket fire that came from Lebanon. They are saying that it was probably a Palestinian faction in Lebanon rather than the much more powerful Hezbollah, which is Iran-backed and has hundreds of thousands of rockets that they could send to Israel. So the Israeli military is trying to play it down and responded to it with a small amount of shelling, but is focusing most of its efforts in the south towards Gaza.
So, U.S. President spoke to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu recently and said that he hopes for de-escalation, at least by today. But at the meeting Mr. Netanyahu had with foreign diplomats about the conflict, he made no mention of that. The Prime Minister is following his own plan, isn't he? What is the goal here?
I think it's pretty clear that Prime Minister Netanyahu has his own political calculations in play here. The whole conflict with Gaza and with the Arab citizens inside Israel started at the same time as the opposition coalition that was aiming to form a government that would be in opposition to Netanyahu's 12 years in power. Just as they were getting going, the fighting started, and Netanyahu has everything to gain by keeping it going, because then he can say that only a leader like himself can stand up to world leaders and condemnation and pressure coming even from the White House, and continue to pursue Israel's military goals.
So clearly those international calls for a ceasefire, and there have been many, are falling on deaf ears. What are feelers that you are getting regarding any backlash this could have on Israel in the near future?
I think it's clear, and I think that there are quite a number of political parties within Israel who are starting to exert pressure on Netanyahu and the Defense Minister Gantz to come to a ceasefire. They've achieved many military goals, and they are on the verge of losing any kind of world sympathy that they may have started with last week, being the victim of very intense rocket fire coming from Gaza. At this point, the Israeli response is so disproportionate that people all over the world are threatening condemnation.
Thanks again, Ricky, and do stay safe.
Thank you.
Let's shift focus now to the France-Africa Summit, which has concluded in the French capital, Paris. So the meetings ended with an agreement that wealthier nations should be persuaded to reallocate $100 billion in IMF reserves to African states. A communique from the summit says a substantial financial package is needed so African countries are not left behind in an economic recovery from the global health crisis. French President Emmanuel Macron says the decision is pleasing to France and several European nations. The summit is part of Mr. Macron's efforts to recase France's engagement in Africa, where it once was a colonial power. It's also welcomed at a time when Africa faces a near $300 billion deficit by the end of 2023. We're reiterating the agreement at the France-Africa Summit is International Monetary Fund Chief Kristalina Georgieva. She supports the reallocation of $100 billion to help Africa because it's time to stem the dangerous divergence between advanced economies and developing ones, especially in Africa.
Africa is very constrained in terms of fiscal space. African leaders are in a very tight spot. Revenues are down, expenditures are up, and debt is high. Therefore, if we want to prevent a lost decade in Africa, we all need to mobilize to support Africa, and Africa needs to mobilize itself to support its people.
Merci.
In the meantime, France has declared her support for Nigeria in her bid and a quest to rid the nation of terrorists at a bilateral During the summit in Paris, President Muhammadu Buhari and President Emmanuel Macron agreed to work together to fight insecurity in the Lake Chad Basin area as well as the entire stretch of the Sahel region. President Macron said the French government would be there on the side of Nigeria and is willing to support with everything to assist the country to overcome the security threats. He also pledged to support Nigeria in confronting challenges with procuring COVID-19 vaccines. President Buhari said Nigeria is willing to work with France and all international partners and looked forward to intensifying existing partnerships with France. Staying in Europe, the German government has agreed to pay reparations to Namibia for colonial-era genocide, which happened at the beginning of the last century. In the agreement, a formal apology will be made by the German president for the atrocities against the Nema Herero people. The atrocities stem back from 1904 to 1908, when German colonial forces brutally suppressed uprisings by the Nama and Herero and driving others to a desert where they starved to death. About 65,000 of the 80,000 people and 10,000 of them, an estimated 20,000 Nama people, are thought to have died. Germany formally acknowledged that the atrocities constituted genocide in 2015 and has since been negotiating a restorative justice deal. Hundreds of migrants are still braving the treacherous Mediterranean Sea to make their way into Spain, the Ceuta enclave, despite the country's expulsion of thousands who have swum or climbed there over the last few days. Around two-thirds of the roughly 8,000 migrants who made it to the enclave have been expelled. The Interior Ministry confirmed this today. Many who were sent back said they were determined to head for the Ceuta again, and as dense afternoon fog descended, hundreds of young men made a fresh attempt to approach the roughly 6-meter-high metal border fence before being repelled by Moroccan police. But young Moroccans have been sharing their hopes for the future. Many say they're in Spain to survive and help their families. Others say they want a good life and pray that God will help them live in a foreign country. Morocco has in recent years coordinated closely with its biggest trading partner, Spain, to crack down on migrant flows into Ceuta and another Spanish enclave, Melilla, as well as across the Strait of Gibraltar. Ceuta, with a population of 80,000, is on the northern tip of Morocco across from Gibraltar. Video footage showed hundreds of teenage migrants there being processed at a warehouse where Red Cross officials gave out food and drink.
Actually, I am here in Ceuta, and I'm here for survive and for help my family. All my friends here for help her families and for find the work and find the justice, because my country don't have any justice. The Morocco is big bad country. It's looters. We find her in the trash.
Still ahead on the program. She's only 27 years old, but she's rolling like a boss. Gift Solomon is breaking stereotypes in an industry most women have not really ventured into in the UAE. Stay with us to hear more from her. Welcome back. Days after Cyclone Tauptay hit, India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi has been able to assess the damage, making an aerial survey earlier today in his home state of Gujarat. Cyclone Tauptay has weakened since making landfall in Gujarat on Monday, when it packed gusts of up to 200 kilometers per hour and is expected to lose strength during the day. It ripped out power pylons, damaged about 16,500 homes, and blocked more than 600 roads, piling pressure on authorities battling a massive spike in COVID-19 infections and deaths amid an overstretched health network. A local official says Gujarat, which was among the states hardest hit by the second wave of the virus, will resume its vaccination efforts from Thursday after a 3-day suspension due to the cyclone. Cyclone Tauptay unleashed waves of up to 25 feet offshore before it hit the states of Maharashtra and Gujarat during the past 2 days, leaving a trail of destruction that killed 61 people. Neighboring Pakistan isn't having it easier. They may not have felt the full impacts of Cyclone Tauptay, but got some in dust form. A powerful storm followed by rain hit parts of the capital Karachi on Tuesday. Under the influence of Tauptay, at least 3 people were killed in roof collapse incidents when strong winds triggered by the dust storm slammed into the city. Residents, however, welcomed the change in weather conditions after a severe heat spell that had gripped the city for 3 days. Over in Britain, climate change protesters from activist group Ocean Rebellion today staged a theatrical demonstration outside London's Science Museum. Activists dressed as cleaners mopped up after others wearing oil cans on their heads spilled liquid over the pavement in front of the museum. In April, Ocean Rebellion's parent group, Extinction Rebellion, partnered with Greenpeace to back a boycott of the museum's climate exhibition, which is sponsored by Shell, one of the world's biggest oil and gas firms. The group says that such sponsorship by energy companies is an attempt at greenwashing, creating a false impression of a company's products as being environmentally friendly.
Activist scientists who are trying to... Oh, let's pay them off! Knowing that next week I'm on that cruise.
To the COVID-19 pandemic, Britain's Health Secretary Matt Hancock says surge testing will take place in more areas around the country amid concern about the Indian variant. This comes as Prime Minister Boris Johnson says there's increasing confidence that COVID-19 vaccines are effective against all variants of the virus, including the one first found in India. Here's the global update.
Very much, and the British Prime Minister Boris Johnson expressed his confidence about vaccines' efficacy as he addressed Parliament today, saying they work against the coronavirus variant first found in India, with a leading epidemiologist saying it may be spreading less quickly than at first feared.
We've looked at the data again this morning, and I can tell them, the House, Mr. Speaker, that we have increasing confidence that vaccines are effective against all variants, including the Indian variant, to his point.
And in France, non-essential retail outlets have reopened for the first time in 6 weeks as the country gradually winds down its third national lockdown in a little more than a year. With infection numbers beginning to improve and a vaccination campaign gaining momentum, retail businesses and their customers are desperate to regain a semblance of normality. Economists estimate that the latest lockdown caused much less disruption than the previous two as people adapted to working from home and businesses forced to close got by on government handouts and furlough schemes. Austria has also reopened its famed coffee houses in a win back of its strict coronavirus measures from today onwards. Customers, however, must provide evidence that they have been vaccinated, tested or recovered before they can visit a cafe or restaurant, as well as reserved beforehand with name, telephone numbers and email address. The reopening has become a significant signal not only to residents of Vienna and other Austrian cities, but seen as a sign worldwide in the defense of the virus. Finally, COVID-19 tally in India has reached over 25.4 million after 267,334 cases were registered in the past 24 hours. The death toll has also risen to 283,248 after 4,529 more deaths were recorded, the highest to be recorded over a 24-hour period so far. In a bid to flatten the curve, most of the states in the country have imposed night curfews and partial or incomplete lockdowns.
Finally, Gift Solomon is no ordinary lady. The 27-year-old has made a name for herself in the United Arab Emirates by becoming the nation's first female delivery rider. Interestingly, her new occupation was born out of a place of pain and frustration. She never finished school and fell victim to fake employment agents, leading to many months of hardship in the UAE. Our correspondent Mayowa Adegoke shares her story in this report.
Nigerian Gift Solomon is the UAE's only female delivery rider. The 27-year-old, who hails from Ologbo, Edo State, works at Dubai's Freedom Pizza, where she serves as an assistant manager, but jumped at the chance of going into the delivery business when the opportunity presented itself.
When I sat down, I was thinking, Gift, what's wrong with you? Can you really pull this off? And then I started thinking, so many reasons started coming to my head, like, you've come this far, you left home without thinking too much, how you're going to survive somewhere else. So being this person, being a rider, wouldn't really be much of a difference. And I know as a person, as an individual, I grew up with a strong mother. And I know myself, like, I can do stuff. There are some certain things that I think that's tagged that ladies cannot do. But then that doesn't mean the law doesn't allow people to do it. It's just because ladies are not coming out to do the stuffs.
However, beyond this boldness, hers is a story of success against all odds. At just 22, she had to drop out of National Open University due to financial constraints. With her higher education, she moved to Dubai in search of a better life. But like many unfortunate individuals, she also fell victim to fake employment agents.
So when I came, I was in Dubai for about 6 months. There was no job. And trust me, those 6 months was like, should I say, the worst months of my life, because I really literally have to really struggle considering the cost of living. It's a bit on the high side. So I practically struggled asking money from friends. I couldn't ask my parents because I told them I already have a job.
Her determination paid off. From working as a phone operator in 2016, Gift rose to the position of assistant manager just last year when her ambition took this latest turn.
There are some people that think it's not accurate for me to be a rider. There are some people that think, some people feel, it's all about tips. Or some people feel, I read some comments which is really not so cool.
She hopes her story can serve as inspiration to other Nigerian youth to always embrace hard work regardless of their circumstances.
As a community, and knowing the news that we have about Nigerians and Africans in general here, it's so good to see this sort of changes.
Gift's greatest wish is now to see more women taking on daring opportunities as she herself continues to effortlessly break down gender stereotypes one delivery at a time. From Dubai in the United Arab Emirates, Mayowa Adegoke.
Truly inspirational. That's the world today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Joke Rogers.